Hello. Um, Maybe I'm circle jerking. Maybe I want to just reiterate my point, but I want to talk about. Maybe I want to self-validate by talking about this. I want to talk about long, consistent, or what causes change in people. And I'm talking about long-term, real, permanent change, not short-term cold showers, go for runs in the morning, and then uh, stop like 3 weeks later, right? I'm not talking about this. Like, what's the difference between change that lasts or changes that stick and ones that don't? And it comes, the mechanism by which it seems to work, or how should I say, people think that it works, or I thought that it worked, is you need to change your beliefs. You need to make a decision and commit with it and use willpower to make it stick. Atomic habits, right? Well, actually, no. That was a misreference. Because they say to not use willpower. It's routine is atomic habits. Well, another point they mention in the book is your identity, who you think you are, and how your routine shapes who you think you are, right? And I would go as far as to say that all of those things are not the core fundamental driver for change. Yes, knowing those things is going to give you more control and make you more capable, but it is not the single most important driver for change. And the driver, the fundamental, the most final one is arguably the most like slow burn. It takes the most amount of time to alter, well, especially for well-developed people. Like if you're still a child, you can change this a great amount. If you're an adult, it would take either some super extreme experiences or extreme amount of work over a long period of time. Um, and what this is generally there's this idea that I was I first saw when reading about psychology, and it's this idea of conflicting beliefs, right? We have two beliefs. For anything, we generally have like two opposites of what we could think about that, right? So we have the affirmative and I don't know how it's spelled. I also don't care. And I don't know the what's the opposite of affirmative? I don't know. Rejection, rejecting, right? We have these two variations for anything. So let's say I any given like topic, any given idea, you could be like, do you like to do you think it's worth your time to do X? And that could be anything. I don't know, swim, all right? And there could be affirmative and rejecting sides to that belief, even like there will always be two sides to the coin. There will always be like, yeah, swimming is gonna give me this, this, and this. Like a set of positive things that are gonna be affirmative to that activity, and then rejecting is gonna be a set of reasons why you shouldn't do it. Right? I'm gonna get wet. I need to spend some time. It's maybe cold. Maybe someone pissed in the water or whatever. Um, Whatever. Right? And the list can go on. And we as humans are extremely simple in terms of what drives us to do certain activities. The idea behind like atomic habits is you just start doing the affirmative actions, and then over time it shifts who you are, and it reinforces, uh, and reduces the cost to doing those actions. The- And that's a good idea that works to some degree. The thing that they fail, the thing that, but the mechanism by which it works is you just create an extra affirmative thing, which is like your habit and your association of yourself with your habit, right? But that itself might not be enough um, to tip the scale. So if you were to think of affirmative and rejecting beliefs as the way your brain weighs whether something's worth doing or not, and it's a scale, it's like that is, weighing these, all the points that you have here, and all the points that you have here, and it weighs them against each other to decide which one to keep doing, right? Which ones to pursue. And if you want to like change something, it's not really about going through and doing it and starting to reinforce it. That doesn't really work from my experience. Um, there's something more important that needs to occur before that. It You need to have your scale tip in favor of the affirmative action. If assuming that we want to adopt a new behavior, not reject. If you want to get rid of something, then you do the opposite, right? You make the scale tip, to this side. And the question is, how do you do that? And my current answer to this is by updating your world view. You create a new model of the world by either learning new things, uh, and really processing what you're getting out of the said action. So, for example, by let's say in swimming example, I would look at all the things that I'm getting from swimming and all the things that I'm not getting from swimming, and I would, or the things that are uh, I'm losing or going against swimming, the rejecting actions, I will, or rejecting factors, I will break down every single one of them and truly assess whether it is my weighting of it is valid. And a lot of the time, it's not going to be valid. And generally, by kind of reassessing these things that make up our decisions, we're able to come to a more kind of accurate or a more, or let's say a new form of understanding, right? And as and by doing that, we get the chance to tip the scale in some direction. Sometimes it will tip it in rejecting direction, and sometimes it will tip it in affirmative direction. I would go as far as to say that in most cases, or how should I say, long term, it doesn't matter in which of the directions you tip, you should always update your worldview to be as accurate as possible. Because then, what does it mean to make it as accurate as possible? It means that all of your beliefs are in line with your interests. And that means that you're able to accurately judge whether you want something or not. So in case of swimming, you might have some, for whatever reason, have decided that you want to start swimming or more often, right? But then when you go to reassess your beliefs, you realize that uh the rejecting points actually have a lot of, they're very valid. There's a lot of reasonable uh, answers to them. And if you look at your informative things, why you even want to do swimming in the first place, you kind of look at it and it's like, yeah, that argumentation is actually pretty weak. Why the fuck did I want to do swimming? And in that case, by, reviewing those ideas, you actually realize that you don't fucking need to swim, and neither do you even want to swim. And in that sense, yeah, maybe it might have the opposite effect of what you wanted initially, but it's still a better outcome. Like, because it allows you to do actions that are more in line with your interests. You might have realized by reassessing that swimming has nothing got to do with your interests. It doesn't achieve any of the goals that you want to achieve. Or it might do the opposite, right? You might be able to align it with your interests and see how it connects. So, this reassessing allows us to make uh, filter our actions by which that do achieve our interests and ones that don't achieve our interests, and getting rid of actions that don't directly achieve our interests or less likely to do so, like swimming, for example. Let's say I wanna, I don't know, get rich, so I go swimming, and then I kind of think about it. What the fuck is swimming got to do with being rich, right? And maybe, uh, and maybe it actually helps me feel better and that helps me be more energetic, which raises my productivity, right? That might be a part of it. That might be a valid justification. But for someone else, it's not going to have the same effect or this to the same degree. And then to them, it wouldn't actually make sense to do this activity if they want to get rich, right? And therefore, it is they shouldn't be doing it in the first place, right? So this weighing, and after you've reviewed it, you're and you have like a more accurate understanding of what the activity actually is, and what you're getting out of it, and what you're losing out on because of this activity. Like for example, I go swimming, I'm losing out on a potential, I don't know, a few hours of work or whatever, right? Or whatever you're trying to achieve. Um, a few hours of reading or whatever, or rest that I could have gotten another way. Um, it allows you to. Oh no, I've already made the point. Um, so basically, what you need to do is kind of like shift your balls, shift your ideas such that the scale, it doesn't need to completely go one-sided like this or like this sided, though it does, it's nice when it does, but starting off, it just needs to tip a little bit in one direction. And that's good. Just having like making your kind of balance like 51 49. If you're like a high awareness person and you're about to do the activity and you go into thought process mode, that basically means if you're to like slow down and not go like impulse heavy, it basically means that the 51 will always win, right? If you give it enough time, the 51 will always slightly outweigh the other if you were to give yourself time to actually process why you're doing it. And that kind of goes back into the atomic habits, then that will reinforce that activity, and then that will make, a lot of the time the things that hold us in place, or like you might be addicted to that behavior, or you have habits, and that allows you to slowly, roll those balls over, and then that weighting becomes much easier over time. It becomes like 80-20, right? Because there's a lot of recency bias, right? There's a lot of things like, um, oh, doing this is a cheap way for me to get my stimulation, or this is currently the thing that I have wired myself to. And there's a lot of bias in doing things that you have habits towards. That's the whole concept of atomic habits, the ideas presented in the book, and they are correct. I'm not arguing with them. I'm saying, how do you achieve the ability to want to even go through with the process that would allow you to shift those is by addressing your worldview, right? And once it's 80-20 or whatever, then it's much quicker, much easier, much less effort to kind of go into this direction. You don't need to pause for as long. You don't need to wait. You don't need to assess why you're doing it. And this gives you a lot of, you're able to do it using less energy or whatever. It becomes more reinforced. It becomes more, how should I say? Maybe you do it more optimistically, things like that, right? There's less conflict within you that is draining energy out of you, um, by the conflict itself, right? So over time, it becomes more streamlined and more efficient. So what do? We need to tip the scale a little bit in one direction. That's the example with the 5149. And then we need to slow the fuck down. And how do we slow down? Is we apply focus and reasoning and we assess why we want to do something just before doing it. For example, you might have a pathological behavior that you go to every single time that you're super stressed, right? I am super stressed, time to watch shorts for 3 hours, right? Before going into that mode, you just sit down and you think, I'm about to watch shorts for 3 hours because I want to escape stress. Let me just think about it for 5 minutes or whatever before I go through with it. Or like, let me really assess whether this is the thing that I want to do or it should be something else, right? And if the scales have already tipped in, your favor, that extra time, that extra pause will almost always lead to you getting the favorable outcome. Favorable is in the one that, the weight favors, right? The scales favor. And in the same way, you could use like willpower to try to offset it. Let's say uh you want the affirmative, right? And right now your balance is slightly favoring the rejecting belief, right? It's currently tipped in this direction. And so it's actually against what you want. Then in reality, how should I say, in terms of your worldview, it actually gives you more of what you want than you admit that it does. Eh, so you should just reflect on what you want and why you want it, and reflect why you want this. Like it just means somewhere in your construction, your waiting justifies doing this activity, but you for whatever reason are rejecting it, and that's not enough to uh, offset it. Okay, I think I've explained the idea. So how do you achieve long-term change? Very simple. Address your beliefs, address your worldview. And the way that I've observed this kind of recently is I have some pretty strong addictions that are like behavioral addictions, not like chemical, um, that I go to for stimulation. And whenever I don't go through those um, addictions, or how should I say, whenever I stop doing them, I get extreme withdrawal. Like my whole body down stimulates to a point that I become like a drone. I become a NPC. Like time flies like crazy. I lose the ability to focus. I become dysfunctional, right? Super, super extreme stuff. Super, super high penalty. Super, super high withdrawals from not doing the activity, right? So in that sense, um, if I want to do anything at all, I kind of almost rely on doing these little band-aid crutch behaviors to like be to function, right? And for a, a long time, I've kind of had these periods where I use a lot of willpower to resist them, and I would last, some period of time, but eventually it will just come down to me being unable to justify, how should I say, like my withdrawals would get worse, 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 and worse to a point where I'm just sleeping the whole day, right? And I would, it would kind of outweigh the the consequences of not doing it would outweigh the reasons for not doing them, right? If that makes sense. Okay, I will clarify what I mean. The kind of withdrawals would become one of the like key points for why I should persist with that behavior instead of like rejecting that behavior, if that makes sense. It'll be an affirmative argument for that specific behavior. And I was like, I'm feeling so bad, that's why I should do this to kind of get rid of this super negative feeling. It's not a negative feeling, it's more like I'm super fatigued, I can't do anything, I don't want to be like this, right? And that fatigue was always enough to kind of shift my balance enough to favoring it eventually, and then I would always relapse, right? And recently, I didn't even like intentionally try to do it. It's just my worldview has shifted so much over the last, few days, weeks, months that um, how should I say? My so I'm trying to reject something, and that's become like 60-40. It's become super like one-sided. And as my withdrawals are getting, stronger and stronger, this is becoming sometimes like 49, and this is becoming 51, and it's, getting close. Maybe I will still relapse at some point. I don't know, right? But right now, every single time that I've been like on the very edge about to relapse, um, the weight was still more towards rejecting. I just have thought about this process and I've realized the way it's affecting my life and the way it prevents me from getting what I want. It's basically, how should I say, short term, it might give me something, but long term, it's completely closing my paths to what I truly want on like a way bigger level. And when I'm weighing, my choices, and I'm like, fuck, do I actually go back and do it to get rid of the consequences of this addiction, or do I? And in doing so, I will maybe delay how long it will take me to recover from this, from how long it will take me to actually rebuild, the things that I want to foster within myself. And when I think about that, it holds weight, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to stay in this state longer. Therefore, I must, like, as appealing, I will say this. The affirmative things have never lost their appeal. They're still kind of appealing. It's just the, well, I wouldn't, okay, okay, no, I've worded that wrongly. That's completely wrong. Um, they have lost their appeal in a sense that every single time I think about it, I try to almost go through it. Like I don't have this, don't do it no matter what. I'm not using willpower at all. I'm letting myself decide whether I want to do it or not. I don't believe in willpower. Willpower is not an effective tool for resolving your problems on a permanent basis. Willpower is a crutch that doesn't work long term. It's a crutch that degrades. So, um, as I'm there, I'm like, okay, if I actually want to do it, I will do it. I give myself full freedom to do that. But I stay true to myself in a sense that I assess, you know, I really give myself time to assess whether I want to do it or not. And what has surprised me is so far I have not uh caved and given into this, even despite some pretty strong, my body's rejection of this, And the kind of conclusion I've come to why that is I've shifted my worldview so far in that direction that I will never be able to justify to do that affirmative action again. It's just okay, maybe I will be able to justify it, but currently so far I've not been able to justify it because I don't know, it just lost its appeal. Like whenever I think about doing it, I just don't feel as optimistic about it. I don't feel as like, oh my God, I'll do it, and then this will wash away all my tiredness, and then wow, 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 this is gonna be so good. I see like the bigger picture, and I realize what is costing me long term, and I realize that this tiredness is initially caused by overconsumption of this crutch. It's like if you were to drink coffee all the time to get rid of your tiredness, uh, it's kind of ironic because once you start getting off of coffee, it you actually realize how much you've shifted yourself to where without coffee you're going to be super super tired. So in a way, you've kind of the addiction itself has created the need for the addiction itself. Like the problem that the crutch solves actually makes the problem stronger, and that's what makes it a crutch and not a permanent solution. Because like crutches by their design, let's say I don't know, I broke my leg and I use a crutch to walk, right? Uh, it's a crutch, like by definition, if it by me using it does not improve my strength of walking, like if it doesn't improve my ability to walk, if it doesn't allow me to develop long-term ability to walk, and it makes sense to use the one when you're healing, right? But if you were to continue using the crutch after your, bone has healed, then you're never going to recover your ability to walk. And the longer you use the crutch, the more uh, degraded your muscles in your leg will be. And in doing so, you will need the crutch more and more so because then you'll be like, well, I need the crutch because my leg muscles aren't developed. And why are your leg muscles not developed? Because you use a crutch instead of developing your actual leg muscles, right? And it's kind of the same, and that's true for a lot of crutches. So a lot of addictions, a lot of behavioral addictions actually come from the crutches that we use. And in a case of someone who's broken their leg, how do you get them to stop doing that? They just need to really understand that by continuing to use that crutch, they will lose their ability to walk forever, or for that period of time of until they stop using their crutch. So while they're using their crutch, they'll never learn how to walk. And if they realize that and truly understand what that means, then they will be more likely to actually be like, hey, maybe I do want to walk without this crutch. Why the fuck do I even need it? And then they'll start. It doesn't mean that they'll immediately throw away their crutch and start crawling and shit. Maybe they'll start using crutch less, less, and less. Um, like how should I say? Like maybe they'll use their crutch a little bit, then they'll take it off, and then they'll walk until they're tired. And once they're tired, they put their crutch on so that they can recover, and then they'll take it off once they're ready for another burst, right? And that's kind of how long-term progress looks like. That's how you actually get over addictions. I don't believe in this like cold quitting and just like tanking all the withdrawals. That works maybe for some minor addictions, or if you're in a really good like place in your life and you have a lot of I should say support networks of all different sorts. But that's not, or if the addiction isn't strong enough. But if the addiction is like a super core, super central, like if, and that addiction could be anything. It could even be a belief or a thought pattern that you have. And letting go of a super strong addiction, like don't expect yourself to just cold turkey it and just like never do it again. Like you need to realize the reason why it exists is because of some weakness that you're covering up. And if you were to just throw, uh, baby in the lake or whatever the saying is, that's not going to allow you to learn how to swim. And this whole like idea around just throw the baby in the lake and then use willpower to clutch it out, it's like that doesn't work. like let the baby get exposed to the water and then take it out of the water and then let it get exposed to water a little bit longer and then take it out of the water, you know, so that the baby builds some tolerance and it builds some it acclimatizes to the activity. It builds some, it adapts. And the same applies to this. Um, let's say you have super, super strong addictions, which I've actually realized, uh, I've kind of been doing this without even realizing. I've changed my worldview, and that makes me, whenever I'm in a good place, completely stop doing that activity. Um, because I realize that it's harmful. And then the only times that I've started doing it is when I'm like at a severe like withdrawals, and then um, how should I say, the threshold for withdrawals for me to do it has become like higher, higher, and higher. And in that sense, it's I've already been moving away from it. I've already been adapting to living without doing this activity. And maybe now it's come to a point where I can tank way stronger withdrawals than I could before, where previously I would relapse and now I wouldn't. Um, I think I've explained the point well. I just don't know if like the slow brains will be able to understand. And I'm not sure whether it's worth to explain it to a slow brain because videos are for me in the end. Um, yeah, whatever. Okay, so I've made my point. I'm not gonna elaborate. Allow yourself to acclimatize. Allow the balls to slowly, how should I say? Like, for example, the withdrawal balls, right? They're gonna be non-existent at the start, and then they get super, super strong, super, super show their presence uh, as you start, withdrawing. It's like, for example, if you were to walk without a crutch for 5 minutes, maybe your leg can tolerate 5 minutes of walking, but can it tolerate standing for 12 hours? No. And the longer that you walk past that 5 minutes, the more and more, you know, resistance and willpower it will take for you to keep walking. And at some point, you get so fatigued that you almost can't bear to not use a crutch anymore. And in that moment, the kind of your balance of whether it's worth or not to do it, there becomes another factor of extreme fatigue. Or if I keep walking, will I injure myself, right? And that's a completely reasonable part to factor into your calculation. And um, once you reach that point, yeah, put the crutch back on because that will allow you to. It's not necessarily a failure in a sense that by even going through that exposure to walking without a crutch, you have developed your muscles short term. Um, you have, you know, started the process of reinforcing or adapting your muscles. And if you were to go through that process over and over again, then your tolerance would have grown up eventually to a point where, yeah, maybe by the end of it, you can fucking stand for 12 hours without needing a crutch. And at that point, it's like you don't even need the crutch, so you can completely discard it forever. But until you do, you need to be very, very, how should I say, careful about it. Okay, I think I've explained it enough. Basically, you need to shift your worldview super heavy to one side, enough such that, or even a little bit heavy to one side, and oh yeah, let's just stick with the rejecting one. And by doing that, you will allow yourself to, over time, even if it will take you many, many iterations, to shift in a certain direction. And that is the true, what true change looks like. It's shifting the balance of your beliefs such that they slightly tilt towards one side, and then that slight tilt will completely reshape you as a person. The bigger the tilt, the more it will the quicker and the stronger the change will be. And your job is to be as honest and accurate with yourself such that the tilt could be the most like I'm not saying to go fucking delusional mode and be like, ah, I am God. Why the fuck do I need crutch? I don't think it's that way of thinking is sustainable. I think it works short term, yeah, but generally people that go super heavy on this have a super bright youth and then they completely uh like die in their by the time they're like 30 or something. Like they completely burn out. They completely disappear. Uh, they become a fraction. They become capable of doing a fraction of what they could, and it's not worth to sacrifice your like the rest of your life just to have a bright youth. It's just not worth it. It's and the reason why you think it might be worth it is because of short-term bias, recency bias. Because something is happening more local to me means it's more important. No, it doesn't fucking mean that at all, right? Whatever. I think I've made my point, and I'm kind of like I'm just yapping now. I think there's not really much else to break down here. TLDR, address your beliefs, shift your affirmative and rejecting um, positions, points, uh, such that you actually do things that are in your own interest. And you can't really go wrong if you're doing that. If you just go for the prism of, is this in my interest? How does this affect my interests in the long run? Uh, and it doesn't need to be any moral or what does society think of this? What's the meaning of this? How does this achieve my meaning of life or whatever? You don't need to go there at all. You just go very simple in your own interests. Like, for example, uh, this idea of does life have any meaning? Should I do anything, right? And you could think about it, well, I need to find the right justifications to live my life. I need to find something that is worth living for and pushing myself for. Yeah, you could go there. But why? Like, just go objectively for your interests. Are you better off, like, in your own personal interests, being depressed as fuck, having nothing to do, being paralyzed, or not? And just, like, go for the prism of, like, not even like meaning or whatever purpose uh go objectively for your own interests of am I better off being a fucking turtle or not being a turtle, right? And sometimes in life, yeah, maybe it makes sense to be a turtle. Maybe it's like a I don't know, you need some rest from whatever the fuck you were doing before, yeah, maybe. But objectively long term, do you want to be a turtle or not a turtle, you know? And to me, it's like super common sense that it's obviously in your interest to not be depressed. And in that sense, you don't need to have like a strong meaning for your life to fucking realize that, yeah, it's objectively not in my interests to be in a diminished state. Regardless of why I'm in that state, like my reasons for why might be absolutely factually correct, right? Maybe there is no meaning in my life, but is it in my interests to be depressed about it? Right? That's a completely different question. And being able to ask yourself with that as a primary kind of distinguishing factor, like as your primary metric for evaluating whether you want to pursue something or not, as just raw like your own interests, you can't really go wrong. And most of the times when people do get depressed and whatever, um, it's because they're incapable of viewing things from the prism of their own interests. And that is like skill issue. That is an inadequate way of uh, um, viewing life. If you're incapable of viewing life through the prism of your own interests, then what the fuck are you even doing? Like you're retarded, objectively. And this is something that I've been super prone to all of my life, and I'm only now changing. But yeah, the point has been made. Goodbye.